Have you ever wondered about the legal glue holding the United Kingdom together? For centuries, the union between England and Scotland has been a topic of fierce debate, and one of the most influential voices in this discussion was the British jurist A.V. Dicey. His ideas shaped our understanding of the UK's constitution, but what did he really think about the Union, and how do his theories apply to today's political landscape, especially with the ongoing question of Scottish independence? Let's dive deep into the mind of A.V. Dicey and unpack his complex and sometimes contradictory views. It's a story of power, people, and the very definition of a nation. So, who was A.V. Dicey? Born in 1835, he became one of the most respected constitutional lawyers of his time. His most famous work, Introduction to the Study of the Law of the Constitution, laid out what he saw as the three core principles of the British Constitution. The first, and arguably the most famous, is the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. What does that mean? In Dicey's view, the UK Parliament, sitting at Westminster, has the absolute legal power to make or unmake any law whatsoever. No person or body is recognized by the law of England as having a right to override or set aside the legislation of Parliament. This is a powerful, almost absolute concept. He argued that from a legal standpoint, Parliament could pass a law to do anything, no matter how unconventional or controversial. It could, for instance, legislate on matters that only affect Scotland, and legally that law would be valid. According to this strict legal theory, the Act of Union of 1707, which created Great Britain, could theoretically be repealed by a simple majority vote in the Westminster Parliament. This view made the Union seem permanent but also fragile, dependent entirely on the will of the UK Parliament. For Dicey, this sovereignty was the bedrock of the UK's political system. He saw it as the ultimate guarantee of stability and order, the idea that one single body held supreme law-making authority meant there was no confusion, no competing legal systems clashing for dominance. It was a neat and tidy solution. When he looked at the union with Scotland, he saw it through this lens. The Scottish Parliament had voted to dissolve itself in 1707, transferring its sovereignty to the new Parliament of Great Britain in Westminster. For Dicey, the case was closed. Legally, Scotland had fully integrated into a new state, and its ultimate governing body was now and forevermore the Parliament at Westminster. This is the classic hardline unionist argument that is still used today. The UK is a single unitary state with one sovereign parliament. But here's where things get fascinating and a lot more complicated. As Dicey grew older and witnessed the political changes of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, his thinking began to evolve. The rise of democracy and the expansion of the voting franchise made him reconsider the source of real power in the state. He started to draw a crucial distinction between what he called the legal sovereign and the political sovereign. The legal sovereign was still Parliament. It held the ultimate power in the eyes of the law courts. But the political sovereign, that, he argued, was the electorate, the people who had the power to choose and dismiss the members of Parliament. He wrote that behind the legal sovereign, which the lawyer recognizes, there is another sovereign to whom the legal sovereign must bow. This other sovereign is the electorate. So, while Parliament could legally do anything, in reality it was constrained by the will of the people who voted for it. If Parliament passed laws that the public hated, it would be voted out of office at the next election. This was a massive shift in his thinking. It acknowledged that legal power wasn't the only power that mattered. Political reality, public opinion, and the democratic will of the people were just as, if not more, important. How did this new idea affect his view on the union with Scotland? It introduced a major wrinkle. If the political sovereign, the electorate, was the true source of power, what happened if the electorate in a specific part of the country, like Scotland, had a fundamentally different will from the rest of the UK? This is the core of the modern debate. If the Scottish electorate consistently votes for parties that want independence, does the will of the UK-wide electorate, the political sovereign of the whole state, have the right to overrule them? Dicey's later writings suggest he was deeply troubled by this question. He saw that a democratic mandate from the people of Scotland could pose a legitimate challenge to the unity of the state, even if the Westminster Parliament held all the legal cards. This is the intellectual foundation for the argument that a referendum on Scottish independence is a valid exercise of democratic will. Even if Dicey himself was a staunch unionist who opposed Irish Home Rule with every fiber of his being, he feared that breaking up the union would weaken the nation. Yet, his own theories provided the very tools for his opponents to argue their case. This brings us to the most modern and relevant part of Dicey's legacy, his views on referendums. Today, we think of referendums as a normal part of democratic life. Think of the Brexit vote in 2016 or the Scottish independence referendum in 2014. But in Dicey's time, they were a radical and controversial idea. He called them the people's veto. Initially, Dicey was highly skeptical of referendums. They seemed to challenge the very idea of parliamentary sovereignty, which he held so dear. If the people could directly vote on laws, what was the point of having an elected parliament? It looked like a recipe for chaos, undermining the representative system of government that he believed was essential for good governance. He thought that complex issues should be debated and decided by experienced politicians in Parliament, not put to a simple yes or no vote by the masses, who might be swayed by emotion rather than reason. However, as he grappled with the issue of Irish Home Rule, his position softened dramatically. Dicey was a passionate unionist and desperately wanted to prevent Ireland from gaining its own parliament, which he saw as the first step towards breaking up the UK. He saw that the Liberal government of his day was determined to push through Home Rule using its majority in Parliament, even though public opinion, particularly in England, seemed to be against it. In this context, Dicey suddenly saw the referendum not as a threat, but as a potential savior of the Union. He proposed that a referendum should be used as a constitutional safeguard. His idea was that any major constitutional change, like granting Ireland Home Rule, or by extension dissolving the union with Scotland, should not be decided by Parliament alone. It was too important. Such a fundamental change, he argued, must be put directly to the people, the political sovereign, for their explicit approval. He believed that the British people, if asked directly, would vote to preserve the Union. He saw the referendum as a way for the national will to override a partisan parliamentary majority. It's a huge irony. The man who championed the absolute power of Parliament ended up advocating for a tool that could bypass it. And he did so in an attempt to save the very Union that his initial theory of sovereignty was meant to protect. By arguing that the people should have the final say on the Union's existence, Dicey, the great Unionist, accidentally laid the intellectual groundwork for the very process that could lead to its dissolution. So, when we look at the 2014 Scottish independence referendum, we are seeing Dicey's legacy in action. The idea that such a monumental decision should be made by the people of Scotland directly through a popular vote is a direct descendant of Dicey's late-in-life conversion to the people's veto. Of course, the debate now is about who constitutes the people. Should it be just the people of Scotland or the people of the entire UK? Dicey, thinking about Ireland, probably imagined a UK-wide referendum. But his core principle, that the electorate holds ultimate political sovereignty, is the same one used by Scottish nationalists to argue that the Scottish electorate alone has the right to decide its own future. In conclusion, A.V. Dicey's journey is a perfect illustration of how political ideas are not static. They evolve and adapt to the world around them. He started with a rigid, legalistic view of an all-powerful parliament that guaranteed the union, but as democracy grew, he was forced to concede that real power lay with the people. And, in a desperate attempt to protect the union he loved, he championed the referendum, a democratic tool that, in a twist of fate, has become the primary mechanism through which the union could be peacefully and democratically ended. His ideas don't give us a simple answer to the question of Scottish independence. Instead, they frame the debate perfectly. On one side, you have his theory of legal parliamentary sovereignty, the argument that the UK is one indivisible nation governed from Westminster. On the other, you have his theory of political sovereignty, the argument that the democratic will of the people is the ultimate authority. The tension between these two ideas is the central constitutional drama of the United Kingdom today. Dicey may have been a man of the 19th century, but his intellectual ghost still haunts 21st century British politics. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this deep dive into constitutional law interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the fascinating ideas that shape our world. See you in the next video.